Oh, great, thank you. So as was probably just noticed now, we will be recording this session. If you would not like to be part of the recording, just feel free to turn your camera off, mute your microphone, and you should be good to go. We will be uploading this session onto YouTube as well. But yeah, so like I said, my name is Amit. I work on the Education Task Force as well as the COP26 National Working Group, and I work as a part of this Weaving Hope for the Future project. Weaving Hope for the Future project basically is a project collaboration between Malaysia and the UK, particularly 3 different organizations that we'll get into in a minute. And our aim is to have an arts and cultural response to climate degradation. The focus here is to empower Orang Asli youth, which is indigenous community in Malaysia, youth and women, in fact, and raise their voices in regards to climate action and climate advocacy on local levels, such as within Malaysia and the UK, but also on the international level, such as COP26, etc. as well. So the 3 different main organizations that are working as a part of this is Klima Action Malaysia, Students for Global Health UK, and Gerimis as well. So those are 3 main organizations. They're also collaborating with a few different coalitions, such as COP26 Coalition. Their partners are involved here and there. We also have contact with local and regional and other global partners as well. We do have a specific chairperson of different organizations and different communities involved as well to help advise further and take the progress of this project further as well. So this project includes a wide range of people from diverse range of backgrounds to actually complete the project in the first place. Looking at what the project entails itself, we have 4 main different aspects of it, 4 different pillars really. One is education, activism, empowerment, and creative art. As a part of the creative art section, which is arguably the main section of the project, we are working with indigenous youth and women in Malaysia to actually create a woven art piece, which will be presented hopefully in preparation for COP26 in a specific location. We'll be exhibiting this as a way of expressing the impact of climate change on different communities, identifying how I guess expressing the emotional aspect of it as well in that process. Alongside this, of course, we want to educate, and that's why this education task force was created. The aim here is just to exchange knowledge between different communities in the UK and in Malaysia, and just develop that intercultural experience and knowledge through that process. Of course, we have activism, which kind of engages with all different aspects of this project as well, and empowerment, again, empowering the youth, empowering women, empowering the indigenous community, and just hoping to make change through this process as well.
Excuse me, Amit. Can you speak a little bit slower?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Siva?
Yeah, you can go on.
Okay, sure. So that's basically a quick summary of what the project entails. I will be linking some social media accounts at the end, which you can access to hear more about the project and keep up to date with the project as well long term. But yeah, we're going to jump straight into the strategic campaigns and advocacy training now. Siva, is there anything you wanted to add before that?
Not really.
Great, fantastic. So another quick reminder to fill in the Google form if you haven't already, as we would really appreciate that. This will be used to get an idea of who's involved with these projects and how we can reach out to more communities in the future as well. So really do appreciate if you could fill the form in. That should be linked in the chat below. Great. So looking at what we'll cover today, the first thing we'll cover, of course, is advocacy and what advocacy actually is, just introducing advocacy as a general concept. We'll go into planning advocacy and identifying what a policy is and how we can use policy to advocate for different change as well. And following that, we'll go into strategic campaigning, including different stakeholders to engage with and how to engage with those stakeholders. So first things first, my question to you all is, what does advocacy mean to you? This session is meant to be interactive, so please do feel free to shout out or put a message in the chat. I would love to hear your opinion on what advocacy is to you, and we'll move on from there. So just go ahead and send a message in the chat or unmute yourself and speak out. And Tiva, if there's any messages in the chat, please read them out to me because I can't see the chat at the minute.
Yeah, sure. So we stated fighting for a cause.
Could you repeat that? Your voice broke out a little bit. Sorry, Tiva, I don't think we can hear you. Or is that just me?
I think the mic's muted.
Taf, would you be okay to read it out?
Yeah, sure. There's one that says fighting for a cause. Another one says public support for a particular cause or policy.
Amazing. Yeah, you guys are totally on track already. Yeah, so advocacy is definitely about fighting for a cause. It's about using policies and different strategies to mobilize and to take action forward. There's a few different definitions of policies that are presented here. So firstly, public support for recommendation of a particular cause or policy. I think someone clearly stole that line. And then you've got public support for an idea, plan, or way of doing something. You've got an activity by an individual or a group that aims to influence decisions within political, economic, and social institutions. So the general aspect of this is just that doing something to change something, I suppose. So that's a brief introduction as to what advocacy actually is. And you can obviously make change in a range of different ways. You can make change in what we refer to as political, economic, and social institutions. You can make change on a local level through cultural change as well. You can educate people as well. So advocacy can mean a range of different things. Some examples include, of course, legislative change, pushing the governments, for example, to make change on different laws or making policy changes as well. That also includes, again, making those cultural changes that were referred to previously and trying to impact values and attitudes and behaviors of different societies to advocate for a better future. So there are three main types of advocacy. Firstly, you have personal empowerment, you've got building alternatives, and you've got changing dominant institutions. So these different strategies are used for different scenarios, of course. So again, if you're trying to influence the government, for example, you would be changing dominant institutions. Personal empowerment is advocating for yourself and taking action to improve your own understanding of different issues. And building alternatives is, of course, actually changing the general process or the general situation within which we're surrounded by, really. One of the main ways to do this, of course, is through a campaign. A campaign is simply put a time-specific set with a particular goal. And this leads to a movement oftentimes. The point of the movement is that we get together many people, such as the people in this chat itself, and we involve people to take advocative action and lead up to different campaigns, different lobbying sessions, and different actions in general that lead to hopeful change. I'll go into details as to what these different actions include in later on in the session as well. We'll also go into movement ecology a bit later, but movement ecology, for a quick summary of that, would just be who we have around us and, using one another to take that action forward. Again, building a strong, healthy, sustainable movement. That's it. We're going to go on to planning and advocacy now. As a quick note as well, if you have any questions at all at any point, feel free to put them in the chat or shout them out. I'm happy to answer them as I go along, or we can answer them at the end as well. So don't hesitate to shout out if you have any questions, including for the introduction. Great. So the first thing when we look at planning for advocacy is just getting an idea of what we want to do. So the first question is, what do you want to work on? In this context, we're talking about climate change quite often. So we'll kind of stick with climate change as a theme throughout this training session, but you could work on anything and everything really. So you want to start off with the issue as to why you want to work on something, and to know why you want to work on something, you have to understand the issue in detail itself. So get a deep dive into in this context again what climate change is, how it's evolving, how it's impacting different communities, and based on that we can identify why we want to create a change. You want to, of course, look at movement ecology again. So who is working on this alongside you? What are they doing? How can you work together to create that movement that we've talked about previously as well, and sustain that action? You need to understand your role and where you can add values. So understanding your skill set, understanding your position, understanding where you want to reach to be able to make different changes as well is also really, really important. So you can actually make yourself as useful as you can to your cause. Finally, of course, understanding your own weaknesses and strengths is very important. Not only to actually use your strengths heavily, but also to improve on your weaknesses. It's not a case of not using your weaknesses in the future. It's about improving them to actually, again, further the action that we're taking on together, whatever that action might be. So when we talk about any type of mobilization, any type of campaign, any type of action in general, the first thing we look at is a vision. So that is the why, what we want to look forward to in the future. If there was a perfect future ahead of us, what would that future entail almost? And I guess the first statement there is, if you don't know why you're fighting for something, then you can't really do it, can you? So you have to understand why you're fighting for something in detail. What we're going to be doing is, throughout this training session, we're going to be looking at a few different exercises, looking at basically giving you a scenario, and we'll break down that scenario as we go along. So the exercise in this situation is that you've just joined a campaign organization working on climate change, and you're going to run a campaign. Why? Why is it an important issue to you? Why is it an important issue to you? And why do you care personally? So that can get you all to just write in the text box, or again, feel free to shout out why climate change is an important issue to you and why you personally care about it. Note there are two different questions here. That'd be fantastic. And again, if Taf or Diva could just read out the answers if it's written in the chat box, that'd be great. And this was an even easy one, guys. I think we all know why climate change is an important issue. So I know I'm asking the obvious in a sense, but we're building from the ground up to get an idea of how the campaign will be set up.
So, okay. Wait, so your question is why this climate change is. Can you repeat your question again?
So the question is, why is it an important issue, and why do you care personally?
On the climate change, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got one answer is to protect people and planet, those close to me and those who are vulnerable to its effects. Fantastic.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good starting point. We want to protect the community around us, and particularly we want to protect people that we care about. People that are around us and that are important to us. And it's a really good answer.
There's another answer is because people are already impacted by climate change, including people in my hometown. That's
a really, really important point. Yeah. I think a lot of the times when we're talking about climate change, not necessarily us, but when a lot of people are talking about climate change, they look at it as something from the future. So definitely recognizing that this is something that's impacting us every day already, and it's impacting every community differently, and there's an inequality in how it's impacting us is also really vital. Really good answer. Great. If there's any more, feel free to just shout them out. If not, we will move on. Cool. So when we look at this, on top of realizing everything that you guys have already mentioned in the chat, we want to look at what the key issues are. The Strategy for Global Health often works on climate and health. So I'll be going through this in the context of climate and health, but we won't go into too much detail because I know that this is more of a general climate change advocacy session. But when we look at it, we're going to take a deep dive into what the key issues are. We're going to look at what different key organizations have said. For example, WHO has declared climate change the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. We're going to look at how the temperature has been impacted. So, it's already been risen above 1 degree Celsius, pre-industrial levels. And we're going to look at a few different issues around that. Again, how it's going to impact people disproportionately, how it's going to be leading to further inequality within our societies as well. So those are the key issues that we're looking at when we're talking about developing a campaign. We'll then take a deep dive into that issue in particular. So we'll go into, in this context, of course, the science behind it. So understanding basic science as to how climate impacts health. That might be how the atmosphere is impacted. That might be how different impacts such as asthma is worsened due to air pollution as a result of climate change. So you look into the climate science to get an idea of what the problem is in detail. And of course, again, the scale of the problem. So identifying where it's impacting people and how it's impacting them differently. So that's another key factor to take into account. So you can see here some more data on that. Again, I'm not going to go over this too much because I don't think this is particularly important to this particular session. But feel free to take a look at it later, which I will be sending out this PowerPoint later as well. But yeah, again, you take a look at stuff like how there's an increased risk of more pandemics occurring due to climate change. High risk of vector-borne diseases, waterborne diseases, basically diseases that are spread through water, food, etc., are at a higher risk due to climate change, due to deforestation, leading to more interaction with us and wildlife that actually carry these diseases around as well. So again, a pretty important thing to take into account. And then you take a look into how to respond to climate change, looking at what we need in the context of climate change and health. One of the key things to look at is building a strong health system that can actually endure the impacts of the climate crisis. This is broken down into a few different things. This is broken down into leadership and governance, health workforce, service delivery, financing, and a few more other things that I won't go into. But you kind of break these different things down, identify how we can make change on each of these things to actually build a strong health response to climate change as well. So that's kind of taking a deep dive into your issue and getting a detailed understanding of what you're working on so you can advocate for it, because you can't advocate for something you don't know well enough. So I've mentioned the term movement ecology a few times now, and I think it's a good time now to actually expand on what movement ecology really is. Movement ecology, simply put, is just who is around you and what they're doing and how we can work with them to make that change. Movement ecology is the organizations in your area, what exactly they're pushing for, looking at different initiatives that are developing around you, and looking at issues that you feel are under addressed as well. So there's two aspects to this really. We're looking at organizations and what they're up to and what they're actually lacking. There's different ways to make change. When we look at that, we can actually notice that there's an organization working on a particular issue and want to join them in that action because we want to further their progress. And there might be cases where we're thinking, oh, there's not actually enough action being taken on X subject, so we want to actually create a new movement on this particular topic. We might want to create a new movement and work with these other organizations to spread that movement on a national or on an international scale even. So to decide what you want to do, you really have to get an idea of who is around you and what they're up to, really. And again, we'll go into how we can actually reach out to the different organizations, different communities later on in this training as well. So I talked a few times about strengths and weaknesses. Now we're going to look at actually how to analyze that in the first place. If you haven't heard of it before, there's a concept called a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. And before you undertake any campaign, it's really important that we actually cover these different content to identify where they're useful and what threats are posed and how we can basically take opportunity and use that opportunity to take action forward as well. So now the exercise is that you are a student group at a university campaigning on climate change as previously. And the question is, what can you bring? So I'd like you all to propose your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats into the chat or say them out loud. If you're wondering how to define each of these things, strengths and weaknesses are internal and opportunities and threats are external. So internal being strengths and weaknesses would be what I am good at, what I am bad at. Opportunities would be what is around me that I can take opportunity from, and what are threats around me that I should actually try to tackle or avoid impacting my work. So yeah, please feel free to unmute your mic or say it in the chat as well. So I guess we'll start with strengths. If I could just get everyone to write down what they believe their strengths are in the context of creating a climate campaign, that'd be fantastic. I have finally figured out how to actually use the chat function. So let's take a look at what we've got so far. I'll be looking over there, sorry, for the chat function. So we've got access to and being representative of the student voice, motivation, and time. Yeah, really, definitely true. And I think as youth, motivation and time is a key skill that we have that I think everyone looks to us for. Whenever I've spoken to people who have a lot more experience than me in this action, they often praise the fact that the youth have that motivation, that have that energy to get up and take action now as we need it. And definitely bringing the student voice forward is always very, very important, or just the youth voice forward in general. A lot of resources and capacity as a university student. Yeah, definitely. So university definitely does provide us with a lot of different resources, and it's important that we use those resources forward. We take on our network that we've developed at university to take action, and we do have capacity as a university student, so we can also use that as well. In regards to resources, some of that is internal because some of that might be your strengths because you can create resources yourself. A lot of the time, it's also external, so it could be an opportunity as well. So an opportunity might be that you have resources available from your university as well. So that's one of the ways in which you can kind of see how these things interlink between one another. Great. Let's jump into weaknesses. What are potential weaknesses that you might have? Or what a university student in general might have? I don't expect you to break down your own weaknesses right now. Come on, guys. I can start off with one. I think as a university student, one of the weaknesses that I feel I often have is experience. Well, there you go. So Monica mentioned that straight away. So limited experience and perceived credibility. That's a really good point. I don't think we have reduced credibility, but there is definitely this conception that being young means you aren't as credible. So not taken as seriously sometimes. Yeah, so authoritative voices to listen and might not have enough financial resources. Financial resources is a very important one as well. University students are known for not having the most money in the first place, but especially when running a campaign, it's hard to get that money together to actually take action as well. So all those points are really, really important. Identifying how we are limited, for example, limited experience means jumping into it and just trying to get more experience. Credibility wise, this is a hard one to tackle, but identifying ways in which we can actually express the youth voice in communities that don't tokenize the youth and actually listen to the youth as trusted communities is a really important aspect of this. And then obviously financial resources. identifying ways to find grants, learning how to actually apply for these grants in specific, because there's a whole strategy around applying for these financial grants. It's all very detailed in itself. So developing those skills onwards to be able to take action wherever you're feeling your weaknesses are present is really, really important. So let's jump into opportunities. So what opportunities do you have as a student group? So we already mentioned that we have a good network around us potentially, of different researchers, of different students who might also be interested in working with us. What else do we have?
Amit, I got a few people that asking you to talk clearer. There's few people finding it hard to understand actually. Yeah, sorry.
Sure, that's okay. That's okay. I can slow down. So the question I'm asking now is, what are the different opportunities that we have as students? So working together with other student movements, other climate justice movements as well. Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. So that's looking at movement ecology straight away. We're looking at who is around us and how we can take action together. I'm going to move on now because I know that we've got a lot to get through as well. Quickly mobilizing students, definitely using our time and energy to collaborate with other organizations. Again, so we've clearly got good collaboration there. We're kind of looking at ways in which we can identify other organizations or other communities working on the same issue as us. And we're looking at how we can mobilize our particular community. It's really important that we focus on mobilizing students in particular because we have that network available to us. So we should really be using that as actively as possible. How about threats? What are the different potential threats that we might face? Yeah, yep. So student groups can disband as students graduate. Really important point. Identifying how long the advocacy length is of that campaign. You don't want to have an action done by 5 people who are not going to be able to finish the action in the first place. So definitely identifying how long you have for an action, and the students might be disbanding after graduating as well. Safety and intimidation from authorities is a really important one as well. Yeah. We've mentioned authorities as a particular threat as well in previously. So yeah, safety, intimidation is a really key aspect of this. And it's really important that we do keep ourselves safe throughout this process, because there's no point in taking actions that endanger us when that will actually lead to a reduction in the movement. If we're no longer available for the movement, we can't really take action forward. So it's really important that we do take care of ourselves and stay safe throughout this whole process. Limited movement, yeah, definitely. It can be hard to get people together. People are quite busy at university. People are working on different subjects. So it's quite hard to get the movement together in the first place. Convincing people actually take action in the first place is also very hard in itself. And then, of course, engaging with different organizations and also reaching out to professionals in the university can also be quite intimidating and hard to do. So limited movement is definitely a really important point to include as well. Amazing. I think we got some really good points there. We're going to jump on to the next slide now, but feel free to use this to go into more detail if ever you need to. Oh, there's a quick one that I'll just read out as well. So political issues, as we are just students, it's hard to oppose larger groups. Yeah, agreed. So I think that definitely is a threat. I think as students, we definitely have options to take action and ways in which we can create change with larger groups, but it definitely is hard to do so because, as I mentioned previously, there's not much credibility associated with us, even though we can be very credible people. We're not considered that way oftentimes, so it's hard to get ourselves heard and listened to. So yeah, definitely a really interesting point as well. Fantastic. Okay, so next question from me to you is, what is a policy? If I could get people to just shout out or write down what a policy is, that'd be fantastic. And if you don't know, that's okay. You can say you don't know as well. Document outlining goals and actions of an organization. Yep, definitely. A really good summary of basically just what we want to do and what we are doing. Set of rules, principles for decision making. 100%. I think that's a really important one. When we go to external events, when we're discussing with people outside of our organization, it's important that we don't just give our opinion, that we give the opinion of the whole community that we're working with. And the policy really helps us to do this. You know, if you have a policy ready to actually identify what our opinions as an organization are, we can put those opinions forward rather than our personal opinions forward. An action or strategy proposed by organizations, yes, definitely. A series of standards adhered to or practiced by an organization or so, 100%. So different regulations, different structures in place, planned strategies, definitely planned strategies as well. I'm sure you guys are able to see straight away that there's similarity in all of your answers, but there are some differences as well, which we're going to break down now on the next slide. So there's different types of policies really, and that's where that difference comes into play. Some policies are labeled for field or activities. Some express general intent. So some can be a general statement of what the organization believes in. Yeah, there's some specific proposals as well. Some, focus on numbers and identifying what we want to do as a future goal in specific. You've got legislation as well. You've got opinions and beliefs and company policies, etc. as well. So there's lots of different potential policies that we can look at. But yeah, looking at who makes a policy now, you've got a range of different people. Anyone can make a policy. You've got governments, and you've got ministers, and you've got different departments in the government. But you've also got organizations, like all these organizations that we're working with. Students for Global Health has a range of policies on a range of different issues. So policies can be used by any movement or any group, really. Looking at how a policy is actually created, the first thing you want to do is look at the economic, social, and environmental aspects of these issues. Then you want to look at multi-stakeholder engagement. So again, looking at urban ecology, identifying who is actually around you and how you can work together before you actually write the policy, so you can identify what calls to actions to put forward to each relevant organization. It's really important. You form a policy, you make decisions on it and you implement the policy, and then you go back and you review the policy. It's really important that after an X number of years or an X number of months, we review each policy to see how we can make change as well, because things change within the movement and they change very fast. So we need to keep on reviewing our content and identifying ways to improve it every single time we can as well. So for example, for Students for Global Health reviews its policies every 3 years and creates new ones based on that. So again, looking at what changes policies, I think we just covered this a minute ago, but every X number of time, we want to just review the policies forward as well. A quick note about policies, I did mention that it's used for external engagement. I think that's a really important point to take home through the strategy. When we're talking to externals, we have to make sure that we're sharing the opinion of our community, not just our own opinions. So always check out your policy before you have a meeting with an external, and use that policy to express your intent forward as an organization. Great. Now we're going to jump into strategic campaigning. Do we have any questions so far? Doesn't seem so. But if you do, just shoot them down in the chat and I'll answer them. No. Okay. So jumping into campaign. A campaign is an effort to bring about some change. It's not a single action, but a combination of a number of actions, reports, and events put together in a sequenced plan. So that was written by the UNDP. So when we look at a campaign simply is just a range of actions put together in a given time to work towards a specific goal. Now let's take a look at different campaign and lobbying. So looking at lobbying in particular, this is basically an attempt to influence policies or any other documents or decisions, basically, of any official. That can be the government, or that can be other organizations that you want to work with or push forward. That could also be the university, for example, in the context of our storyline that we're creating. So it's about getting a meeting together with a person that has a lot of power, has a lot of influence, and trying to suggest your ideas to them and convincing them, basically, as to why they should listen to your policies and your ideas. And this isn't only done through a meeting, it can also be done through letters, etc., and other forms of communication, but meetings are a really good way to go. And campaigns often include lobbying as a type of action within a campaign. So you know, again, campaign is quite a broad ranging concept. So you speak publicly in a campaign. Of course, like I said, you can use lobbying in a campaign because you can express that you have been lobbying and say that out loud to the community to let them know that this is going on in the background. But other ways you can also hold a campaign includes newsletters, includes public events such as this potentially. You know, this is part of the project, and that could be considered a campaign action in itself. You can look at direct actions such as protests as well. You can look at writing for newspapers to express your point of view further as well. So there's a range of ways in which you can really get your point out and get it heard by the wider community for a campaign. So there are different types of campaigns under this preset. One would be mobilizing and involving people. That's basically having to just get everyone together to take action together. And, you know, another one would be pressuring decision makers. So that would be lobbying, for example, would be a way of doing that. Informing and educating the public is also a really good way to do this. So that includes sessions like this, you know, developing capacity and developing education for our communities is really important as well. You've also got changing behaviors and attitudes. So your aim could be to, for example, change the way in which people perceive climate change, you know, reduce the number of climate deniers within our community is one example. And persuading people to support something is also really important. Getting out there and speaking to people, and this is kind of a broader one, I guess, because it involves all the other things that we talked about, but it's really important that we develop persuasion skills, negotiation skills to take these actions forward, really. Finally, what's really important generally is building a positive image for an organization. We need to have credibility as an organization, especially as youth organizations that, you know, of course, we mentioned we do have a hard time getting that credibility that we do deserve oftentimes. It's really important that we have a professional website, it's important that we have professional policies, and just generally present as people with capacity who can actually take these actions forward. As you probably noticed as well, these campaigns work together oftentimes. You know, there's not just one thing, they all combine together to make one big, strong campaign with a range of actions. Now we're going to look at campaign planning. And we kind of covered this slightly earlier, but this goes into a bit more detail here as well. So again, you want to identify what the problem is. You want to identify what you're trying to achieve with your campaign. Who can help you or hinder you? Again, looking at that movement ecology. And you need to choose your message. It's really important that we have a clear message to send to our community. One statement can be said out loud in 10 different ways. We want to get that one specific way forward, just so that whenever they speak to someone else, they use that exact phrase again. And it kind of spreads into the community in a way that whenever they see that phrase, they know it's coming from your organization or that it was rooted in your organization. And that's how you just develop an organization, develop a campaign further, and it helps empower your community to, again, take that action forward. You need to look at what tactics you'll use. You know, again, looking at lobbying, looking at writing on newspapers, looking at developing capacity through different training sessions. So there's lots of different ways to do this. You need to look at how to get your message out, of course. So social media is a really important aspect, really. Especially as a youth, if we're trying to mobilize the youth community, people use social media a lot in our age group. So it's important that we identify how to get a good grasp on social media and how different social medias work. You know, Twitter works different to how Instagram works. Instagram works differently to how Facebook works. And we have to identify how to reach different communities within that area. And of course, TikTok's out now as well. TikTok is a great way to reach the youth community, you know. So keeping up to date with the new trends that are coming along and using them to our advantage is really, really important. And of course, you have newspapers as well. You've got interviews as well that are also useful to get your message across. Looking at what you need, I think, Arrow, you mentioned that financing is really hard to get a hold of as well. So that's one of the things that we really do need and we need to work on. We need to work on getting that financing together. We need to work on developing the capacity together as well. Looking at resources, we need to look at, if we're working with different local communities into the national community overall. So for example, the Students for Global Health, we have 36 different branches. We don't expect every branch to create their own social media content every time. We'll prepare it for them and we'll send it out to them and tell them that this is what we want you to use to make their life easier as well, You don't want to have to repeat that work over and over again. So just having that efficiency in place where not everyone is recreating the same content is really important. So simplifying what we need and making it easier to get access to is really, really crucial. And then assessment, how it's going. And do you need to change anything? We at the start of the session, actually, we just had a Google form with all of the details. So we use that to see what we need to change and how to make improvements in our sessions in the same way that goes for any campaign in general. We have to collect data and collect different resources to identify how well our actions are taking place and what we can do to improve it. And also, again, if it's taking place really well, then we can use that action again later on in the future as well, You can use that even in a grant proposal to actually say that, look, we did really well in this action, so please, give us a grant because we've clearly shown that we have the capacity. So again, different ways to basically develop a full campaign strategy. Great. We're on to SMART goals now. SMART goals is basically a way to identify what we want to do and identifying how to get it done. So they're meant to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. What I'd like you to have to do now is to put together a SMART goal for a campaign that you're doing at your university. So this will be a 3-month-long campaign. So I guess kind of hinting at the time-based aspect of it already, as the fact that it's 3 months long. So if I could get you to type into the chat again or say it out loud, what would your SMART goal be for this campaign? Any thoughts so far? Well, while you guys write it out, I'll share one that I came up with earlier. So I wrote it down here just to be easily accessible. So a goal might be to raise awareness on the issue of climate change, and you want to do that. Okay, emails now, aren't I? Sorry. Specific roles of universities in it. So, measurable would be you want to reach 10% of the student body, for example. And attainable, identifying how to get it done, who to get it done with, and relevant because climate change is a very relevant issue right now. Everyone is threatened by it, so that makes it a relevant issue straight away. And then finally, time-based, of course, would be identifying how long you want to take to reach that 10% of the population. So yeah, that's a quick one that I came up with earlier, but it can definitely get better and more specific as we go along. So Veronica's written to get 100 staff members to sign a petition to make the university back the climate change movement. Perfect, yeah, I love that. So decarbonize is a specific goal. We've measured it by getting 100 staff members to sign a petition. It's attainable because we are at university, we've got access to these staff members. Very, very relevant because not only is it climate change, it's specifically decarbonization, an issue that we face with universities quite often. So targeting the correct community there. So that's really important. And then you could also add that time-based section, which is obviously 3 months as well. So that's a really good SMART target. Fantastic. I'm going to let people just write down more if you have any more, but I'm going to continue now. So I'll read them more as they come along. So we're going to go on to stakeholders now, looking at how we engage with different communities and how we actually get people to work with us. And the one thing that I found really useful for this is an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch, if you don't know, is basically a 1 minute long speech, just identifying who you are, presenting your problem, presenting a solution, and sharing your proposition as well, with a call to action at the end. It's called an elevator pitch because the concept is basically that you're in an elevator with someone and you have a minute to say what you want to say to them before they leave the elevator. You might think this is not going to happen, but it oftentimes does happen. You're at a conference, you're at a meeting, you're at any event really, and you identify that there's a key speaker that who's actually quite influential, and you want to work with them in the future. Your chance is only available for that 1 second while they're free. Clearly, if they're quite influential, everyone wants to speak to them. So when they're getting a cup of coffee or something, you get 1 minute or so to have a chat with them to try and introduce them to who you are, what you do, and get them involved with your organization. So yeah, this is a really important skill to have. So I'm going to give an example of what the Students for Global Health elevator pitch is. So I'm not going to read this out in detail, but it identifies who we are, it identifies where we work, so locally, globally, and nationally, and identifies what our vision is. So to create a fair and just world within which equity and health is a reality for all. So we kind of bring our main slogan out straight away by saying that. We're identifying how broad our content is, so education, advocacy, and action. We're identifying what range we have, so 36 different university branches. The second part of that would be specific to each person you're speaking to as well. So if I'm speaking to someone from the WHO, for example, the World Health Organization, I might say that I want to involve them in developing capacity, and I might want to get them to help us raise awareness within the youth and tell them that this is important for them as well, because that's one of their strategy points. So one of the skills to have there is actually knowing what different key stakeholders, key organizations around you focus on, so you can identify who to work with. Again, that climate ecology, that ecology that we talked about a few times, is coming back into place again. So yeah, this is a quick elevator pitch that I've put together. What I would like, and this might not end up happening because I know this is quite a big request, but what I'd like is if someone could offer to do an elevator pitch now for me. I will happily role play as someone who is, say, a speaker at an event, and I'm representing the United Nations. What I'd like is for one of you guys to offer to basically do an elevator pitch and invite me to work with your organization on whatever issue that you'd like to speak about. I'm sure you guys have different specialties that you work on, so you can choose whatever you're best at to go for. Do I have any volunteers? I'm seeing lots of smiling faces. Very few hands up. I know it's quite a scary thing to do. I remember doing this for the first time in a training session, and honestly, that session helped me build a skill so well. I figured out what makes me nervous, what part I get scared about, and identifying just when I'm blabbering on too much and when I need to just be straightforward and simple with the person that I'm speaking to.
I can volunteer if you like.
That'd be fantastic, Veronica. Go for it. So I'm just having
Before I do, what is the value proposition again?
value proposition. This is kind of a general statement, really. The way you might put this forward for Students for Global Health, for example, might be that we work in equity for health, and you also work in equity for health, and then going, let's have a call to actually discuss this in more detail. So just a very general, what we share as two organizations.
Okay, cool. I'll start then. Hi, I'm Veronica Kozic, and I'm the communications lead for the National Working Group within Students for Global Health. And within Students for Global Health, we're fighting for the healthcare student voice within the climate change movement. And part of this is we've created a youth survey on youth views that we'd like you to share. We think this survey will be really important in creating the demands from the government. And I think it's part of your organization's values to help elevate the youth voice as well. So I'd like you to set up a call with me to discuss this further, and we can get started on next steps to help get the survey promoted on your social media.
Amazing, amazing. I think that deserves a round of applause straight away. That's perfect. Yeah. And I think you notice as soon as you jump into it, it becomes a bit easier to just say it. You kind of flow with what you know and what you're good at. You know, you've worked in this, like I know Ronna's been working on that survey for a while now, so she knows what she has to say. You kind of just let it flow as you go along. A few things that add to that is not add to, but generally I'd say how I end it is rather than saying this is what I'd like you to do, I just say, can I get your email? I tell them what I'm going to do, and I don't ask them for an action point yet because I don't want to push them away too quickly. I just say, can I get your email? And then in the email I'll add details as to what I want to work on with them, and if I want to set up a call with them, and that just gives them an idea of basically who we are, our scale, our credibility. Again, we talk about credibility as a really important aspect of this. And then yes, got to get the buzzwords in. And you get that with practice, really, you know, jumping in there and just doing it is how you get those buzzwords into place, because no matter how much you write them down, it never sticks in your head unless you do it out loud. Fantastic. That was really, really good. And I know it's really good because I work with Veronica and I know what content she's talking about. So I know she'd actually put that together really, really well. Great. Does anyone else want to have a go at this? I think it's quite a good skill to have. It's always good to practice. If not, that's perfectly fine. We can move on. Somebody from Malaysia. Go for it. Who's volunteering? If no one else volunteers, it'll have to be you, Ara. Do you want to go for it, Ara? No worries if not. We can move on from now, and if everyone wants like stay at the end to do it with me, I'm more than happy to do that because I know it's good practice. If you want to do it after the recording is ended, we can also do that. So I'm happy to stay afterwards as well. Great. So yeah, just put something together for your organization if you haven't already, and use that as actively as you can. It's a really good skill to have. Now you want to look at who you're going to say this to in the first place. You know, you have to know who has influence, who has power, who's interested in you. So we use the stakeholder map to identify that. The stakeholder map is on the right-hand side, is just broken into 4 different aspects. You've got high influence, low interest. You've got high influence, high interest. You've got low influence, low interest, and low influence, high interest. And you want to identify different stakeholders around you in that movement, you know, that movement ecology again, and put them into place on each of those sections to identify who you want to reach out to first, who is most likely to reply to you. And yeah, again, that's just really important to get a hold of to identify how to get involved in the movement itself. I'm not going to ask you guys to do the exercise because we don't have a lot of time left, but I will give you an example in here of what different stakeholders might include. So high power, low interest would include the local MP, member of parliament, mainstream media, charities, the United Nations, the WHO would be one. Veronica was very ballsy by going for someone from the United Nations. But the thing is, it really is worth doing so if you get the chance around them. So social government and ministers as well. Low power, low interest into the general public. They get so many different messages sent out to them. Aim high, definitely. So the general public gets so many messages sent out to them that oftentimes it's hard to convince them to actually take part in different actions. So that's why they're considered low interest as well. Again, this is why you don't want to, you know, target every single person that you identify. You want to target the people who have a kind of an interest in climate change but don't really know where to go in that aspect of it. High power, high interest is fossil companies, you know, university staff working on climate change. You've got large activist groups as well. So these organizations that we're working with together, we're all in our circle, high power, high interest. And university staff working on climate change are of course high interest because that's their focus. Fossil fuel companies are an interesting one because they don't really want to work with you. Oftentimes they want to work against you, but that still makes them high power and high interest. And that's where lobbying comes into place. You know, at times if you can set up a meeting with someone from a fossil fuel company, you can make change by having a meeting with them and lobbying them to take action. And if not, you can identify what issues they have and how we can target them next time. You know, so they're always high power, high interest as well. Low power, high interest can include researchers, it can include students as well, and climate change deniers. What I would say about this is, as much as they might be low power, it doesn't mean that they're low power overall. You know, if we have 10 interested students, that's a movement building up. That one individual student is not necessarily powerful, but as 10, they become really powerful. So even if it's low power, high interest, make use of that high interest and convert it into high power yourself. Great. So designing your key message. Again, you want that slogan out there. You know, you want to identify what you're working on. You want to share that out there with everyone. What you want them to do, what will they engage them, who or what they're influenced by, who are they accountable to, and why should they engage, and why now? You know, I think why now is an easy one for climate change because it's happening right now. But yes, you want to break down those different aspects and use that really. Again, looking at the previous slide, general public are low power and low interest because you can't have one way of engaging everyone. You know, you have to identify how to engage specific communities. So that's the general aspect of designing a key message. What I'm going to do is, if someone can quickly try to develop a key message, that'd be fantastic. So Veronica, you did a elevator pitch a minute ago with me as a UN representative. If I could get someone to write down or say out loud a key message you would give to a UN representative, what would that be? I'm not going to spend too long on this because we want to end. We're just kind of running a bit over now, in fact, but want to end soon. But if I could get anyone's thoughts on that, what would your one key message be? It doesn't have to be the UN. You can choose any of these stakeholders that you would like to. Okay, that's okay. If more come up, we'll go into them later. But for example, one that I can think of would be, if I'm working with a large activist group, my key message might be that the youth voice is important in climate action. That's probably not the best way to phrase it, but I could say the youth are the future, and therefore we deserve a voice in climate action. You know, and that's a way to get the youth involved with that larger organization as well. So that's one example of how you might have a key message, and you'd look at, you know, engaging them through social media, engage them through emails. And if it's an organization, you engage them with them through emails usually, because they're usually quite receptive to actually listen to you. But yeah, allocate financial resources for climate adaptation. Wonderful. Yeah. So for the UN, that's a really good one. They have the financial resources and they need to use it for adaptation. And to actually further that, I'd say adaptation and mitigation to reduce climate change as well. I think Aaron knew that, but this is just generally for the recording. But yeah, so really like that idea. Looking at tactics now, we have covered this before, so I'm not going to spend too long on it, but you've got petitions, you've got events, you've got social media graphics, you know, you've got building networks and coalitions is a tactic. It's a really strong tactic that helps develop, you know, that movement again. So again, all these different aspects of it are really important. For example, in the UK, if you have a petition, if there's enough signatures on a petition, the government has to debate this petition publicly, right? So you want to reach that 100,000 signatures to get them to debate on it. So there are different tactics to engage with different communities and different stakeholders long term. Great. So the final part of it is planning and timeline. you have to have a timeline in action, and you need to plan it in detail to identify how to get all that timeline actually done in the first place. When you do this, it's important that we have a bit of flexibility because things change. Different organizations come into play, different issues come into play. So be a bit flexible, but have a structure in place ready to take that action forward. You need to identify how to keep people engaged long term, identify what they care about, what's important to them. Make sure you have new actions coming into place over time, not too fast because that can be very overwhelming. But if you do it too slow as well, then people get bored and don't want to get engaged anymore. There's a lot of different things to take into account here. Of course, capacity is also an aspect. So if people are very busy, you should identify how to engage them when they're busy and not take up too much of the time and stuff like that as well. So I guess the final thing I'd say is plan, do, check, act. So you need to make a plan, implement that plan, and then check that it's working, and then act on it again and improve it again and improve it again. So lots of reviewing and lots of editing and lots of continuous improvement, really. So with that, that is the presentation done. Thank you all very much for joining me. I really do appreciate all of your time. Also, Rhiannon, I don't think is here, but thank you to Rhiannon for actually helping me put together this presentation. So I do appreciate your time with this as well. And yeah, that's everything from me. A quick note as well to check out our future sessions. So 24th of July at 9 p.m. Malaysian time and 2 p.m. UK time, there'll be another session mobilizing on the ground led by the Malaysian team. So please do come check that out. We'd really appreciate your time there. And definitely follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to keep up to date with all of our actions going on. Again, we want you all there for these actions that come up as well. So thank you all very much. If you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to stay behind and answer them. If you would like to do an elevator pitch with me as well, happy to stay behind for that as well. But yeah, thank you all very much. Thanks, guys. I think we can stop the recording now, Kiba.